Ty Lawson's latest legal battle has now reached its final chapter, as the former NBA star faces a sentence that could end his career for good. And as shocking as this case is, it's only part of a much bigger story. Let's go back to how it all started. The $34 bottle. On the evening of July 16, 2026, a liquor store owner in Castle Rock, Colorado called the police. Her report was short and plain. A man had walked into her store, picked up a bottle of Tito's vodka, and walked back out without paying for it. The bottle was worth $34. That was the entire crime. But what happened next turned a routine theft call into a story that made headlines across the country. The owner watched the man take a drink straight from the bottle outside the store before walking toward a nearby restaurant called Celepi's. He set the bottle beside the fire pit, walked inside, and sat down at the bar as if nothing had happened. She added one more line. The man was stumbling and he looked possibly drunk. Officers drove over to Celepi's and found him exactly where she said he would be. They asked him for a name. The name that went on the paperwork that night was Ty Lawson. Then the arresting officer added a small detail to his report, and that detail is the one every outlet in the country would end up repeating. He wrote that Lawson emanated the smell of an unknown alcoholic substance. There was a friend sitting with him. That friend happened to be holding the Tito's bottle when police walked in, which is the kind of bad luck that ruins an evening. Officers detained him for a few minutes while they worked out who did what. They decided quickly that he had no part in the theft and they let him go. Lawson did not get that same walk. He was arrested at the restaurant and taken to Douglas County Jail, where he was booked on a single charge of theft of less than $300. Under Colorado law, that sits far below the felony line for an ordinary person with no record. A charge like that usually ends in a fine, a handful of community service hours, and a mark on a file that nobody ever opens again. The booking room is where it stopped being ordinary. According to the probable cause affidavit that reporters later obtained, Lawson screamed at a police officer during the pre-booking process and repeatedly called that officer and white bitch. The same document says he kicked the glass wall of his holding cell, yelled the word stop over and over again, and spat on the floor. And then it ended as suddenly as it began. The affidavit notes that he eventually calmed down and apologized for the way he had behaved. He was processed and released the same night. No body camera video has been made public. No jail footage has been released either. Those few written lines in a police document are the only account the world has of what happened inside that room. A few days later, the booking photo came out. It showed him in a jail-issue top, his face flat and still gray showing through his beard. Thousands of shoplifting calls happen in Colorado every year, and almost none of them leave the county. This one crossed the country in about 72 hours, and it did so for one reason only. It was the face in the photo. Local television had it first, then the national outlets picked it up, then the sports blogs, then the timelines by the weekend. A man who had not played an NBA minute in 8 years was trending again for something that had nothing at all to do with basketball. Ty Lawson won a national championship at the University of North Carolina in 2009. He was taken 18th overall in that same year's NBA draft. He played 551 regular season games in the league and started 344 of them, and across all of that, he earned roughly $43 million. $43 million in career earnings. A $34 bottle of vodka. Everything this story is really about lives in the space between those two numbers. He did not need that bottle. Nobody who has earned that kind of money needs a $34 bottle of anything, which means the bottle was never really the point, and the theft was never really the point either. The point is what a person has to be carrying to walk out of a store holding one. Years before Castle Rock, Lawson sat on a podcast and talked about his time playing overseas. He was not confessing to anything. He was laughing, bragging about a league he could score on in his sleep. But listen to how casually he describes the night before a game.
You can have a long night and come in there and walking to 30, 40 points.
He meant it as a compliment to himself. It reads differently now. The ability to drink all night and still put up big numbers the next day is exactly the thing that lets a problem sit hidden in plain sight for years. Nobody pulls a man aside when he is scoring 30. The bill for those nights arrives much later, and it arrives all at once. After the Castle Rock arrest, Lawson said nothing publicly for a full week. The affidavit details leaked. The mugshot leaked. The jokes started, and they were cruel in the way sports jokes always are. Then on July 23, 2026, he opened his verified account and posted twice inside the space of about 2 minutes. The first post read, "Being black in America is tough. Being lied by a pasty-faced white woman wild, stay out of Castle Rock, Colorado." The second one landed roughly 80 seconds later. It read, "This the wildest and more racist I've been through. Between them, those two short messages pulled thousands of likes, hundreds of replies, and well over 2 million views. Now look closely at what those posts do not contain. He did not deny taking the bottle. He did not explain the fire pit or the bar or the drink outside the store. And he never once addressed the language that the affidavit places in his own mouth inside that holding cell. Outlets covering his response pointed out the strange symmetry, because the police document accuses him of racial insults toward an officer, while his own posts accuse a woman of lying because of race. That collision between what a legal document says about a man and what the man says about himself is not new ground for Ty Lawson. A reporter standing outside a Denver arena described the exact same problem more than 10 years earlier.
He's in the public eye, and obviously he not only has to deal with the court of law, but he also has to deal with the court of public opinion.
That was January of 2015. Back then, Lawson was a starting point guard, a franchise centerpiece, and the leading scorer on a playoff team. He was also sitting in a cell that same morning. What happened over the next 14 months would end with him standing in front of a judge in Denver in a suit, waiting to hear whether he was going to jail.
He was able to avoid that today, Mitch and Kelly, and Lawson is very lucky because he has now gotten 4 DUIs.
4. To understand how a Bob Cousy Award winner ended up with 4, you have to go all the way back to the beginning. The sentence that was supposed to save him. He was born on November 3, 1987, in Clinton, Maryland, and grew up around Washington. After 2 years at Bishop McNamara High School, he transferred to Oak Hill Academy in Virginia, which at the time was the most feared high school program in the country. In his senior season, Lawson averaged 23.8 points, 9.1 assists, and 5 steals per game, while the team went 42-1. He was a first-team All-American for both USA Today and Parade, and he played in the McDonald's All-American game. Every scout in America knew his name. He chose North Carolina and Roy Williams. As a freshman, he averaged 10.2 points and a team-high 5.6 assists and made the ACC All-Freshman team. As a sophomore, he pushed that to 12.7 points a night, fought through ankle injuries, and reached the Final Four. Then came the junior year that made him a legend in Chapel Hill. He averaged around 16.5 points with 6.5 assists, was named ACC Player of the Year, and became the first point guard to win it since Phil Ford in 1978. He won the Bob Cousy Award as the best point guard in the country, and in April of 2009, he led North Carolina to a national title. The title game against Michigan State was the loudest statement of his life. He recorded 8 steals, which still stands as a championship game record. Across 105 college games, he shot 40.3% from 3, which for a point guard is close to unfair. But there is a date buried in that same stretch that almost nobody noticed at the time. In June of 2008, 10 months before he cut down the nets, Lawson was charged in Chapel Hill with underage drinking and driving. His blood alcohol level was reported at 0.03, below the adult legal limit. He pleaded guilty. Other charges were dropped. He was ordered to complete 20 hours of community service, and then he went back to being the best point guard in college basketball. That is the first entry on a list that would get very long. It cost him nothing. He was a kid and the season was starting. Minnesota drafted him 18th overall in 2009 and traded him to Denver the same night. He sat behind Chauncey Billups, learned the job, then took it. On April 9th, 2011, he became the first player in NBA history to make his first 10 three-point attempts in a single game, finishing 10 of 11 for 37 points. The peak arrived fast. In the 2012-13 season, he put up 16.7 points and 6.9 assists, received MVP votes, and the Nuggets finished 57-25, the best record in franchise history at the time. The next year, he set a career high at 17.6 points and 8.8 assists. The year after, he handed out 720 assists, a Nuggets single-season record on paper. This was a franchise point guard entering his prime. Inside the building, the people who signed his checks were watching something else entirely. Nuggets president Josh Kroenke sat down for a phone interview with Mark Spears of Yahoo Sports in July of 2015 and said the quiet part out loud. He said the problems had gone on for years, going back to the winning seasons. Then he said this: there were just a lot of times where you were at practice and you just know. You could smell it. You know there's probably deeper issues than he would probably let on. Kroenke said the team had been privately trying to help Lawson for the past couple of years. He had repeated conversations with Lawson about his life struggles, and Lawson kept saying he would fix it but could never fully shake them. Then Kroenke named the exact moment the franchise gave up, which came when Lawson skipped the first practice after the 2015 All-Star break following a trip to Las Vegas. The public version began on January 23, 2015. The team spent that night at a charity social in Denver, raising money and shaking hands. Lawson stayed until around 10. A few hours later, police stopped him.
The score tonight, point guard Ty Lawson was arrested early this morning on suspicion of DUI just a few hours after attending a Nuggets charity event.
The police account was not close. It was around 1:19 in the morning on Park Avenue West, and he was clocked doing 61 miles an hour in a 35 zone. Officers reported slurred speech, a strong smell of alcohol, unsteady balance, and bloodshot eyes. He refused a chemical test. Then he volunteered something that changed how the case would be read.
Officers say he seemed inebriated, failing a sobriety test and refusing another, but not before telling police he had another DUI when he was a student playing for North Carolina.
He was talking about the college case from 2008, the one nobody remembered. He may have thought he was getting ahead of the story, but the lawyers who looked at it came back with an answer that would end up saving him.
It appears that his prior case out of North Carolina from 2008 is not a DUI conviction. It was an underage alcohol-related incident, and there was never a conviction involved.
That single legal distinction is the hinge this story turns on. Because the college case did not count as a prior, Colorado courts would eventually treat a man with a long alcohol history as something close to a first-time offender, and the stakes were enormous because of what Denver had already committed to him.
The NBA has not announced whether action will be taken against the Nuggets' best player and leading scorer, who signed a $48 million contract extension.
6 months later, it happened again in Los Angeles. On July 14, 2015, around 2 in the morning, California Highway Patrol pulled him over on the 101 freeway for driving a white Mercedes-Benz at high speed. He was booked at 3:43 and released hours later on $5,000 bail. The Los Angeles Times headline called it his 4th DUI arrest. 3 days later, a Denver judge stopped waiting. Lawson was ordered into a 30-day residential alcohol treatment program before either case could move forward, and he entered Cliffside, Malibu in California. Continuous alcohol monitoring came with it. While he was still inside that facility, Denver traded him to Houston. The franchise that drafted him, the city where he set the assist record, all of it was gone in one transaction, and he learned about it in rehab. The legal machine ground on. In November of 2015, Lawson pleaded guilty in Denver to driving while ability impaired, a lesser charge than a full DUI, along with a lane violation. The bigger charges were dismissed. Then the league took its turn. The NBA suspended him 2 games in December over the Denver plea, then 3 more in January of 2016 for the Los Angeles arrest. 5 games, no pay, in a Houston uniform he never asked for. Sentencing day came on March 22, 2016. He flew in from Indiana, because by then he had been traded again. Prosecutors argued that he should serve time, that nothing had changed, and that he had never faced a real consequence. His attorneys leaned on the fact that the college case did not legally count.
Instead of jail time, the judge decided that Lawson will do 1 year of probation, and he also has to perform 24 hours of community service.
No jail, not one night, a single year of supervision, a day of community service hours, and a short list of conditions. The court also spelled out exactly what he was allowed to do for the next 12 months.
So that means he'll have to stay away from drugs and alcohol for this next year.
That sentence was the entire safety net. Stay sober for 1 year, do the hours, sit the classes. By any honest reading, it was a gift, handed to a man already arrested 4 separate times with alcohol involved. He had 11 months before a Denver court found out what he did with it. Goodbye forever. The basketball park collapsed first, and it collapsed fast. In Houston, he went from a career high of 17.6 points a game down to 5.8. A short stint in Indiana followed, and then Sacramento, where he averaged 9.9 points and 4.8 assists and recorded the first triple-double of his career with 22 points, 12 assists, and 11 rebounds. It was the last real stretch of NBA basketball he would ever play at a starter's level. While he was in Sacramento, the Denver court finished doing its math. In March of 2017, court records showed that Lawson had tested positive for alcohol on 3 separate occasions and had failed to complete his required community service. A bench warrant was issued for his arrest. His attorney denied the violations and moved to fight them. Read that again with the sentencing in mind. He was given 1 year to stay away from alcohol. The positive tests were logged in September of 2016 and again in early 2017. The court had asked for the smallest possible thing, and it did not happen. Somewhere in that same stretch, a reporter caught up with him after a rough shooting night and asked about an off-court matter. His answer is the whole pattern compressed into 8 seconds.
It wasn't no letdown. I mean, we had a conversation, everything was good. Personal issue, the coaches know.
Everything was good. A conversation was had. It was a personal issue, and it was handled. He used almost identical language about the rehab stay itself. Speaking after his 30 days at Cliffside, Malibu, he said he still did not think he would have gone in if a court had not made him, and that he had just made 2 dumb mistakes. He also said things happened in the media because he drank and drove, but that he was not some person who was drunk all day. CBS Sports looked at those exact quotes in 2017 and wrote that they are not the words of a man who thinks that he has a problem with substance substance abuse. That was published 4 years before Castle Rock, and it reads like a weather forecast. The people who study this for a living had already explained why it happens. An ESPN profile written while he was still inside rehab laid out the risk factors that stack up around a professional athlete. Alcohol is sold in the arena and flows freely at the after party. The money is enormous. The travel wrecks any routine, and the people closest to a young star often tolerate the behavior rather than interrupt it. An addiction counselor in that same piece described alcohol addiction as a brain disease that needs ongoing therapy and a rebuilt support system, not a 30-day fix. The saddest voice in that story belongs to Keith Stevens, his longtime AAU coach, who had known him since he was 11 years old and described him as a family man and a devoted father who came from a home with morals and values. Stevens visited him in rehab. There is no hidden childhood tragedy in the public record here. There is just a good kid, a very small window, and a habit that never let go. After the NBA closed, the money moved overseas and the talent traveled with it. He played in Lithuania during the 2011 lockout, then went to China, where he averaged more than 25 points a game for Shandong and signed for $2.4 million in one season, and later put up around 27 points a night for Fujian. He was still elite. He was just elite somewhere the American cameras were not pointed. Then China ended, and it ended in the ugliest way possible.
Ty, we can't let you go without asking you about what happened in China. You were banned.
His version of events, told years later on a podcast, is that a contract dispute turned personal. He says Fujian would not raise his pay. A richer club came calling, and a team official who was angry about him leaving pulled 2 clips from a night he live-streamed himself dancing in a Guangzhou club and pushed them onto Chinese social media with a caption he says was twisted.
I'm not gonna say no racist. I'm not trying to disrespect anybody. Like,
sit with that for a second, because the symmetry is brutal. In China, Ty Lawson was the one accused of racism and insisting he had been set up by a woman with a grudge. In Colorado, 11 years later, he would post that a woman had lied on him because of race. Same man, same shape of story, opposite sides of the accusation. And in both, the explanation he reached for first was that somebody else picked him out.
I was just confused. I'm like, yo, why me?
Why me is a question that only works once. The trouble is that the answer kept being available, and it kept being the same answer, and he kept not choosing it. The career after China tells you that plainly enough. He went to Kolossos Rhodou in Greece, then US Monastir in Tunisia, then Gateros del Zulia in Venezuela in 2023, where he was released for disciplinary reasons despite playing well, good on the floor, gone off it, over and over, on 3 continents.
I'm not banned from China, I'm banned from playing in CBA, but they also reached out to me like, oh, you wanna come back?
Which brings us back to a fire pit outside a restaurant in a town of 60,000 people and a bottle that costs less than a movie ticket. Here's where the case actually stands. Lawson faces one charge of theft of less than $300, and he is due in court for a pretrial conference on August 13th. No public intoxication charge was filed. No disorderly conduct charge was filed. Nothing was filed over the booking room at all. He was released the night it happened, and as of late July, no dismissal, no plea, and no further filing had been reported publicly. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.